Welcome to the second episode I've recorded of Drinks Coach Shorts, and welcome to a rather crepuscular Sweden. I'm out visiting my mum. This is our deck. If anybody thinks that global warming's fake, it's December and there's no snow. It used to be snow from October until April. Zero snow. We're about 1 hour's drive south of Gothenburg, so we're north of like the Orkneys. There you go. So that being by the by, it's a beautiful place to be. It is below zero today, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to film a quick Drinks Coach short. Thank you very much to everyone, including my dear friend Professor Harbertag, for being kind about the one I did for Jeroboam's. It didn't end up being that short, did it really? But it's quite a nice, slightly more dynamic kind of look. I thought I'd give it another go. And I'm filming this on my iPad, so I can actually frame myself up. I can see myself in much clearer detail. I know exactly what I'm doing, using a professional mic. So hopefully you're enjoying this. So welcome to Drinks Coach. You can see me on social media on Vinesack, Vinesack, or all lowercase, Drinks Coach UK. Thank you very much to Louise, who very kindly, because of illness, I know you all know that I've had a bit of a chesty cough, unfortunately couldn't make it to what might have been one of the great sort of like dark horse tastings of the year, which is the tastings of the Crus Bourgeois of Bordeaux 2022. Every year there's kind of a showpiece tasting of the fancy wines of the Grand Cru Classé of Bordeaux. The Grand Cru Classés are mostly in the Medoc, the long thin bit north of Bordeaux. If you look at a map along that sort of like the pencil that's along the left-hand side of the Gironde, that's the Medoc, and that's where the Cru Classé estates are. And there are some south of Bordeaux, in Pessac-Léognan, used to be called Grave, in total still the region of Grave, and of course the sweet wines of Sauternes. Now, that was a classification. There was a classification created. Just let's get everyone on board here. Sorry if you know this already. In 1855, for the World Exhibition, for the Great Exhibition by Napoleon, I assume that's Napoleon, yeah, he basically wanted to classify the best wines they had, all 61 Cru Classé gross as it was. And people think that the classification was done by terroir in the main, I've now discovered. I certainly wasn't told otherwise for a very long time. But actually all they did was go to the brokers, the chartrons, the people that used to sell bulk wine and export it from Bordeaux, and average the price by the case of their top wines over the last 10 vintages. And that's what they did. So it was just put in price order, with Haut-Brion being at the top. And I don't know what the last classification was. It was probably something like Haute Ferrière and Margaux, which is pretty sketchy some of the time. But every now and then it throws up a nice wine. So now we look at those wines and we look at the classification as they are. And there are clear mistakes, one or two, when you look at them actually, and you look at the subsoil and you look at the reasons why these wines are good and they should have been maybe higher up the ranking. Maybe they hadn't been around for that long or something, but there are wines which we know as super fifth gross, like L'Ange would be a very good example, or super seconds, which should have been first gross, let's say Pichon Baron, Pichon Comtesse, Du Cru Beaucaillou. These are super seconds. What's amazing is that list from 1855 is largely held up. And it just shows that whether people knew about why their soils were good or not, or whether they were planting the right things in the right places, whether they knew that much compared to what we know now, it is a fact that the list kind of holds together, that the best wines were good 200 years ago, and those wines are still good now. And then winemaking isn't an influence on that. It's actually where you grow the grapes. So, shit in, shit out. You can't polish a turd. You can't make a silk purse have a sow's ear, blah, 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 blah. Now, there were 61 gross there. I don't know why they were picked. I don't know specifically whether they were just had their hands in the back pocket of the government or the local aristocrats. But there were several hundred other wines, still are, several hundred wines in Medoc, which deserved attention and may be owned or were owned by maybe less affluent or less aristocratic family. And back in 1932, there was a comment made that these wines should be called the Crus Bourgeois, or the wines of the people, I suppose. And there was about 440 of them or something that were kind of listed. And then over the years, people have tried to establish this as a legal system, like with the Cru Classé of Bordeaux, ending in 2008 and 2010 with a mild failure to get it all sorted, or at least so many people were upset and furious about not being on the list, or people not being high up on the list, that it was in danger. The whole Crus Bourgeois system was in danger of collapsing. But I'm very pleased to say that if it's ever been in rare health, it's now. And there's a new classification in 2020, and there are 250 wines which are labelled as Crus Bourgeois. So these are wines that have been tasted for quality and for typicity, out of a list that started of more than double that. And 250 people have been granted Crus Bourgeois status, and within Crus Bourgeois you've got Crus Bourgeois Supérieur, you've got Crus Bourgeois Exceptionnel, so there's even rankings within that. But what I would say is that for red wine, certainly on an unbelievable run of quality in Bordeaux, but I suppose it's down to global warming, of course, as much as anything else. When you look at the vintages we've had, 2022, the one we're on now, may be the best of the lot. It may be the legendary vintage of all of them. Let's talk about good vintages. 2010 was stunning. 2009 was pretty good. It was known as the vintage of the century, but I think it's maturing much faster than people think. But there, of course, there are very good examples. 2009 reminds me of 89, where maybe not all of the wines are great, but 1/3 of them are stunning. 2010, like 1990, where people learned from the mistakes from the year before. Oh, how quick people are to forget. 2010 and 1990 also have a parity, because I think they're consistently better as a vintage than 2009 and 1989, just because people were ready the second time round, and we had another stunner of a vintage. And 1990 still stands up as one of my all-time favourite vintages. 2010 is great. The wines are very alcoholic. It remains to be seen, but I think there are some absolutely amazing wines. Certainly, Pichon Baron 2010, which is probably as close to perfection as I've ever tasted in Bordeaux, is a good example of how good 2010 is. Then we've got 2011, which was much better than people thought. I mean, if that had been in the 80s or 90s, it would be considered a very good vintage. And 2012 was seen as a bit tricky, and Mickey Mouse also. Well, they're on the market right now, and 2012, if you drink lowly Crus Classé Margaux, or anything in the right bank, any basic Saint-Emilions, Grand Crus from 2012, some of them are absolutely stunning right now. So they did come round. 2013, not so much. 2014, a likeable vintage. I think one of the vintages that I like because it's kind of moderate in terms of its level of alcohol and ripeness. So it shows typicity. It reminds me of when I was working in Bordeaux back in the early 90s. I was at university in Bordeaux in 1991. The climate was considerably cooler then, almost recognisably so than it is now. And 2014 reminds me of those vintages. And 2014, I think, in the right bank for Merlot was actually a real success. And I think if you're going to buy wines which are to be drunk and delicious and not too expensive, probably will never be able to speculate hugely on them. I think 2014 Merlots, 2014 right banks, that's Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, Côte de Castillon, etc., Lalande, Pomerol. I think 14 is a bit of a secret buy. I think I like them. 15 was another great vintage in its way, a bit more up and down. It was very warm, reminds me a bit of 85. And some of the vintages, some wines were really fantastic, particularly Pauillac, I think, in 85 was very, very good. In 2015 was very good. And also very good in Sauternes, I think. 16, legendary vintage. Wow. 16s are going to be a while before we see quite how good they're going to be. Amazing precision. Again, amazing in the right bank. I think some of the best Pomerols and Saint-Emilions ever created. And in the left bank too. But 2016 is uniformly very good, both for reds and whites as well. So that brings us on to 17, which again would be considered tricky in the lineup that we've had recently, but actually was okay. It was a good vintage. 18, stunning in the Medoc, I think, more erratic in the right bank. 19, very, very warm, delicious, silky, delicious, succulent wines, almost too warm, as was 2020. There's some bangers, but generally speaking, these wines are big, almost Californian lush wines. 2021, back to more of a classic vintage, and the first really good white wine vintage for some time. And then we're here. 2022. Which a little bit too warm for great whites, and I think the great red wine vintages are. If you look at 1990, 1982, 61 of those great red wine vintages, whites tend to suffer at their expense very slightly. But here we are. Thank you, Louise, for sending me 4 bottles. We've got 4 wines here, which are all classified Crus Bourgeois from the tasting. I don't know how many wines from the tasting, I should have checked. About 50 odd, but it was a fantastic tasting, which I'm very sad to have missed. But we're going to start off with 2. Imagine Medoc. I'm going to do this shape. Medoc's kind of like a peninsula like that. At the top bit, which tends to be quite a lot of alluvial sand going into the Gironde estuary out into the Atlantic. It's mostly sandy soils, alluvial sandy soils. But there are also some the Pyrenees gravel, a little bit of Gironde gravel from the Gironde estuary side, but generally sandy and gravelly, which means very free run soils. Wines that don't age particularly well, very, very fruity, but also some nice aspect. You're right out there in the middle of nowhere, lots of sunshine. So the north bit of the Medoc Peninsula is generally listed or classified as Medoc Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée. The bottom bit, apart from the more famous regions like, Saint-Julien and Margaux and Pauillac, the bottom bit is Haut Medoc, which is High Medoc, which seems a bit weird. We say, why is Medoc at the top and Haut Medoc at the bottom? Well, simply this. The soils at the bottom are a bit better, but also they're further off the water table. They're drier. They're Haut Medoc, they're higher in altitude, only by maybe a dozen metres or so, but they are above the sort of water table of so they're not likely to flood. They're further away from the estuary water. So Haut Medoc is at the bottom and Medoc is at the top. We've got 2 Medocs here, which are north of Saint-Estèphe, which is the most northerly serious appellation, and rapidly become my favourite appellation in Medoc. The wines coming out of Saint-Estèphe are really incredible. There's a whole bunch of different names I could mention, but Félin Ségur, Calon Ségur, what's that wine that Calon makes? But there's Moreau's. Oh, there's so many great wines. Anyway, Mayne. Wow, Mayne's on fire. So these wines are the first 2 that we're going to look at are Château La Cardon. You can't see it. You can't find a more classic Bordeaux label than that. It looks like a baby Douan Milan Rothschild or Château Lafite or something. Classic labelling. And then very unclassic label. This is Poitevin. And these are both wines in the Medoc, north of Saint-Estèphe. This one's the second one is closest to the east side, to the Gironde gravels, and the Cardon's further to the other side with a little bit of clay and a little bit of Pyrenean soil and sand. Okay, so let's pour the first one. I've just pulled the corks on these. Normally you'd leave these for a few hours, so these aren't going to be showing anything. They won't even taste the same in an hour, but I should be able to have a good idea of whether these are good or not. But I'm holding out great hopes for most of these wines. Lovely colour. It's got a brick red colour. So let's talk grape varieties. Well, Medoc is famous for gravel soils that are very suited to, and are maybe the finest terroirs on earth for Cabernet Sauvignon. And Cabernet Sauvignon is really like all the top Crus Cru Classes. Certainly the ones in Pauillac and Saint-Julien are some wines that speak Cabernet Sauvignon as a language, with a bit of supportive Merlot, which gives some silkiness, some bind, some harmony, some support, and also some ability for the wine to drink in youth. And the second wines from these estates, which used to be baby versions of the big wines, there used to be a declassification, maybe of vineyards which were a bit too young, didn't quite have the complexity. Those wines have now been repurposed over the last 30 years, so they're all Merlot dominant. So the second wines are ready to drink while you're waiting for the first growths to be ready. Now, there is a case saying, well, it doesn't matter what grape varieties they're from the same vineyard, and we're expressing a place, a terroir, we're expressing a sense of place of where we are, and if there's a bit more Merlot in it, makes the wine earlier to drink, so that's ideal for a second wine, and we'll put the Cabernet Sauvignon in the wines that will keep for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But frankly, Merlot and Cabernet are such different varieties that it does have a massive impact stylistically on the wine. What's happened recently would be quite exciting is that some estates, like for example Pichon Baron, again to mention them again, They have two second wines. They have a wine which is Merlot dominant, but they have a wine called Griffon, which is like a baby version of the big wine, which is very, very exciting because that's what I want my second wines to taste like. If I want to know what a £150 wine tastes like, shouldn't you be able to buy their second wine at sort of £40 and go, that's fantastic, maybe for my 50th birthday I'll buy a bottle of the posh wine? Because at the moment, if you're buying the second wine and you go, oh, that's fantastic, it doesn't bear any resemblance to the Grand Vin. So it's not actually giving you any indication of whether the Grand Vin is a better choice or not. But I think these wines are so scrutinised and so heavily driven by the secondary market and auction prices and so forth that people know very much what they're buying. So let's go back to the Bourgeois here, which are vastly better value for money, I have to say. Vastly. Cru Classé Bordeaux is getting a bit silly in price. The very, very poorest Cru Classé Bordeaux are around £50. That's a lot of money for a bottle of grape juice, which is okay, which is good, but I don't know if it's £50 good. Most of them are certainly £50 good, but you don't pay £50, you pay nearly 80, 90 for them. Château Cordon, I think this is under 20 quid. I think it's between 15 and £20. Pretty sure this would be almost an equal split between Merlot and Cabernet. I'm looking at the back label here. There is in fact 5% Cabernet Franc in here, but it is in fact 50% Merlot. So there you are. So it's half and half. Not uncommon for this area. I say. Somebody knows that they've got grapefruit here because we have more than the average amount of expensive oak thrown into it. They are going, right, this is one of those vintages where even at £20 you've got a wine that's going to age beautifully and sing like a canary when it's 10 to 15 years old, and maybe keeps another 10 after that. These wines maybe don't have the terroir and the chutzpah to age for 2 or 3 decades. 2 decades maybe, yes, but they're best 10 years old, which is quite something when you're paying that much money for it, are you really? Lovely, plummy, damsony, inky nose. Full of lush ripeness. It's not jammy, it's just really juicy, ripe fruit. Definitely plums. Oh, dripping with plums. Oh my god, black plums. And mulberries. Whoa. Wowee, that's a lot of wine for that money. This is 13.5% alcohol, so it's not bananas high. I've literally just opened that, and that wine is already tasting fantastic. There's no doubt in my wine that's going to taste 10 times better in about 2 hours. And it's cold out. So we start off with Château La Cardon. I'm afraid I don't know where these wines are available in the UK, but I will try and put something underneath it when I post this. Very, very nice wine. Good starter. Okay, moving on to a wine which is not very far away geographically. We're now in Vignoble Poitevin. Again, I think this is very, very similar. Maybe slightly more Merlot than the other one. It's 13% alcohol, not 13.5. So it's an elegant. That's my favourite weight really for wine. I don't want it to be more than that. The alcohol's almost like the suit that the wine wears. If you want to kind of like a Stop Making Sense, Talking Heads, Miyake big suit, 14% alcohol, lots of room for the wine to breathe, lots of alcohol, lots of sweetness, but it tends to be a bit of a paper tiger that you need to have a lot of wine to fill that space. 13% is more a Paul Smith suit. You fit it exactly. It makes you look slim. Well, it certainly wouldn't make me look slim, but it'll make me look slimmer, probably. Anyway, let's have a look at this. Again, colours are quite similar. It's not quite as dark. On the nose, it's not as classic. It smells more natural. It smells like it may have been spontaneously fermented. It's got a lovely, juicy, warm, very winey, kind of elderberry quality on the nose. There's a little funk, a little bit of what the French call sous-bois, slightly fermenty brown leaves on an autumn floor. Or that'd be nice with with gibier, with gizzards, or with a gizzard salad, or maybe some squab pigeon, something like that. I think would be lovely. Again, we're looking, around £20 mark, maybe less. The lack of alcohol show here. This now tastes more elegant, more old school. There's something very nice and leafy about it, and I don't think there's any Cab Franc in here. I think it's Merlot Cab. Might have some Petit Verdot. That's very, very different, but it's full of character, and it feels like a handmade, small holding wine. I like that wine. It's not slick and sleek. It's not over polished and over made up. That's a wine of authenticity. It feels like it's got a sense of place, and it's got lovely sinewy tannin. That's rather attractive. I would love that with something like I said, something gamey, or maybe a bit of country pate. A terrine would be lovely with that. I'm just going to go back to this by comparison. It's unbelievable these wines are only made a 10-minute drive apart, and they're so different. Very polished, very classy, more Cru Classé in style. I'm not sure which one I prefer. I'm enjoying the character of that wine a great deal, but they're both very, very good. Moving on to wine 3, La Motte Bergeron. I've seen this all over the place. For many years, majestic wine warehouses used to buy this, I think, with cash from the Systembolaget when they couldn't sell it. The Systembolaget is the Swedish government wine shops, and they used to go with suitcase full of cash and buy wine back in auction when they couldn't sell it. And these wines used to be sold in majestic with bottle age on. I recently tasted, I think it was a 14 or a 15 La Motte Bergeron. Absolutely delicious. Needs that sort of extra 10 years to be at its super peak. But this is from the Medoc, so this is further south. So you're on the peninsula. You're not up here north of Saint-Estèphe at the top, at the lighthouse top end of it. You're further down, and here we're, I think, between. If you're looking at the map, you're looking on the. You're on the Gironde estuary side, so on the east side, and you're about a third of the way up. So you're between, effectively, Margaux and Saint-Julien. And this one is just south of Saint-Julien. In fact, it's just south of Longueuil-Barton, I think it is. And that's quite poncy soil. That's quite expensive place to be. And I think this is quite a well respected estate. It's an estate that goes back a long way. If you look at actually the rebuild of the estate, it's not dissimilar to some of the very fancy estates that line the sort of boulevards in Pauillac and Saint-Julien. It's got very pointy hats, like Pichon-Baron again, or Parma or something. 2022 Medoc. Oh, look at the colour. My God, that's a much more extract there. This is Cabernet Merlot, exactly equal parts as far as I know. Look at the colour on that. That's fantastic. It's not opaque. It doesn't look over extracted, but it's like the colour of like blood. Wonderfully deep. It has loads of viscosity and glycerol. You can see. I don't often mention this because it's a load of guff mostly, but this wine has good legs and glycerol. It's got lots of extract in here. It's 13.5% alcohol, so it's not stupid high in alcohol either. It's where I like it to be. Gosh, that looks good. Okay, right. Got to bear in mind this has just been bottled, if that. Oh, I'm not sure I've ever had a La Motte that tastes about that good before. It smells of red currant. Black raspberry. I know that's the thing. That's what they make Chambord liqueur out of. Cherry. Definitely cherry there. There's a lovely spice. I think that's coming partly from the wood. It's not overdone in any way. But loads. It smells brooding, like it's almost like a suitcase which you've had to sit on to zip up. It's packed full of stuff. Right. Ooh, that's young. Okay, so that needs an hour in a decanter. But despite the fact there's tannin, there's so much fruit that I could very happily drink that. All it needs is a baguette and a bit of cheese and you're off. Give me some Dupin and Duboursin or some Brie, and that's lunch. So anyway, very, very nice wine. Château La Motte Bergeron from slightly fancier soils further south. Again, I think this is, you can get this for £20. Bear in mind that you can buy 2 or 3 of these for the price of a bottle of Crus Bourgeois next door. Very nice looking bottle. Do look it up. La Motte Bergeron. Somebody's going to be selling this, and this is an absolute stunner for the money. Look, people ask me, when you buy a bottle of Bordeaux at £20 and a bottle of Bordeaux at £50, then a bottle of Bordeaux at 100, 200, 300. what are the increments of improvement? Well, the more you spend, the smaller. The law of diminishing returns. The difference between £50 and £100 is probably about 3%. The difference between £15 and £50, it's about 10%. So this wine is 99, especially in a vintage this good, is all right. How do I explain the great value of these wines? A Crus Bourgeois Superior like this, at £20 in a vintage this good, is better than a Cru Classé Bordeaux in a poor vintage, almost guaranteed. In an equivalent wine in the same vintage, this wine is, let's say, a 90 out of 100, and a top Bordeaux would be 95 out of 100. So it's 5% better. You're paying 3 times more for it. Really? The fact that's most important about this is wine is good enough that it has all the minerals, all the expressive characteristics to tell you where it's from. It has a sense of place. It ages well. It turns into something magnificent when it's 10 years old, which completely belies the price you paid for it. This is all the Bordeaux you need. And it's a wine that's never in danger of being counterfeited because there's lots of them at this price point. You don't have to worry about that. And you can buy lots of it. Buy three of these and have roast lamb on New Year's Eve with your friends, and everyone gets a nice big couple of glasses rather than messing around with a little sip of something from somewhere further, more posh anyway. So there we go. I'm obviously loving this wine, and I don't really know how much more to say about this really, but 5 years, stunning. Even now, in a jug. Yeah, that's 5 stars for me, that one. Okay, so on to the last one. That's the one I do know that my friend Greg Sherwood buys for Hanford Wines, or did do. And this is Cap Léon Vérin, single estate. And this is from an actual appellation within the Medoc. So you've got Medoc, and then you've got, I'm trying to work out which direction you're seeing this on the screen, but you've got Saint-Estèphe kind of like 2/3 of the way up, and then below Saint-Estèphe you're into sort of Pauillac, and then Saint-Julien, and then Margaux. But if you go into the centre, around that sort of height, about 2/3 of the way in, at the top of the Medoc, you get to Listrac and Mouly. And Mouly en Medoc and Listrac Medoc are 2 appellations that don't have any Cru Classés. And I think there are wines that are definitely worthy of it. Du Clouseau, because actually there's some very good clay soils. In fact, it's a region I think probably which is very well suited to making supremely good Medoc Merlot in general. But there's also some nice Cabernet made there too. I'm just trying to think of some estates there, bordering on there. So we've got Listrac Medoc would be Chateau Forecast Hoston is probably the most prestigious. I tasted a 1975 recently. That's nearly 50 years old. Pristine. It must have been hell. It must have been like drinking a grenade when it was first bottled. But it's absolutely beautiful. Still very fresh. And there's Forecast to Prey, which is also a delicious wine from Listrac. In Mouly, you've got estates like Chateau Peugeot, which is one of the great Crus Bourgeois of all. So here we are in Listrac at Cap Léon Vérin. I've heard great things about this. I've also been told this is probably the best Cap Vérin made as yet. It's in a family of 2 other chateaux. I'm trying to remember the name of the family. It'll be written on the label here. It's the Meyre family, Meyre, and I think this is their kind of prestige estate. There's one called Chateau Julien. I can't remember the name of the other is. Let's have a look at this. Well, this has got a little bit more Cabernet in, I think. No, I'm not sure. I couldn't say that for sure. Okay, again, beautiful colour. It's not opaque. You can see through it, but it has this wonderful sense of just brimming with fresh fruits. It looks like the compote of, red currants and black currants and things. Oh, I say, that's pretty good. This wine smells much lusher. Cool. Wow. Packed with brambles. Oh, I say. Oh, God, I would have thought actually that was a Margaux, actually. Smells wonderfully perfumed and fragrant. It has that kind of perfumed herbiness of tay berries and raspberries. Much more wine here. There are some firm, tight tannins in your long time but this wine is surfing on some alcohol sweetness. I think this is higher in alcohol than the others. 14.5% alcohol. So it's a good degree higher than the others. So again, almost a different style of wine, but it is from a lieu dit, a place of repute in Listrac. This is a Grand Vin. I really see there no problem aging for about 20 years, that wine. No problem at all. I would say the Le Mott Bergeron on standard, ditto, and the first two certainly last 20, maybe even longer than that, but they would drink beautifully after 10. So we've got 4 wines here, which you could probably buy. If I came into a shop with 100 quid, I could almost certainly buy all 4 of these, or buy 1 bottle of Cru Classé Bordeaux of substance. Thank you very, very much, Louise. Don't forget Crus Bourgeois. It is absolutely the sweet spot of value, quality, and sense of place in Bordeaux, especially if you like your Medocs. These wines just need a little piece of cheese, and maybe some lamb, some Pauillac lamb, and you're away. Thank you very much for watching this. How long has this gone on for? I can't see this. It's all white at the top there. But it's farewell from Sweden, and it's farewell from me. See you next time.